Good morning, Cincinnati, and welcome in to another season of the Bearcat Brunch, currently brought to you by Bearcat Journal. This is a podcast for those of you that are new that will be every Sunday morning, 9:30 a.m. to recap the Bearcats game from the day before and also take a look around college football and sprinkle in a little bit of Bearcats in the NFL talk. This week, I am David Simone, your host for the show, normally joined by Jeff Howe, who is out of the area right now, tending to some family business. So he will be back next week. I am luckily joined by Aaron Smith, who everyone who follows us knows. So he will be joining us today. As I said, we are currently sponsorless. So if you are interested in sponsoring the show, which one person told us is their favorite show on the Bearcat Journal Network, so that was nice to hear. But if you are interested in sponsoring, reach out to me on the board. Reach out to the Bearcat Journal Twitter account, and we will obviously discuss that. So we will not get into the Bearcats' first game against Towson. That will be discussed in length tomorrow on the BBP, Wednesday on the BCJ pod. So we're kind of just going to do some national stuff today, get everybody ready for what will hopefully be a very exciting 2024 college football season. There were some games yesterday. If the season's going to be like yesterday, then I think we're all going to be in for a lot as we lead into the first year of the 12-team playoff. So, Aaron, how are we doing this morning, my man?
I'm rough. I'm in rough shape. But I had a fantasy football draft last night in Cincinnati, and I am feeling every bit of it.
Oh well, we'll try to get you out of here, get you some rest, some hydration, maybe. Enjoy your Sunday. But I think because we did have some games yesterday featuring two ACC teams, which most people or three ACC teams really. Now that SMU is in the ACC, that will take a while to ingrain in our brains. But the storyline obviously is number 10 ranked Florida State going to Ireland,
right?
Getting upset by Georgia Tech 24-21. I know a lot of people will point to this is why preseason polls are done and blah, blah, blah. I mean, that's going to happen every year. Pick the team, like Miami's ranked again. Why, I don't know. They do this every year, whatever. But I think the bigger storyline in that game in particular is that, similarly to what we experienced last year with sixth-year Emory Jones, fifth-year DJ Uyunglele is kind of who he is at this point in his career, and FSU is replacing a lot of talent from that team, and potentially probably shouldn't have been the 10th ranked team in the country, but double-digit favorite, brought 20. I mean, I heard estimates of 25, 30,000 Florida State fans to Dublin, and just it's kind of laid an egg, got pushed around. I mean, Georgia Tech ran it up and down the field on them. That last drive was clinical pretty much. And, it's tough. You start the year like that. You start the year with a loss. And I think they've got a lot of stuff to figure out on that standpoint. Good win, great win for Georgia Tech. I think there's some good momentum building there with Brent Key. Offensive line guy, building a program through the lines, has a transfer quarterback in his second year, some decent, nice skill pieces around him. But the Florida State thing is the story. And then you move over to newcomer SMU, who was a near, I want to say, 4-touchdown favorite at Nevada, and needed a 35-yard touchdown pass with minute change left to secure the win in a game that the first half they looked like they had no interest in being there. Nevada's 4-20 over the last 2 years. First year head coach Jeff Choate comes in, has done some rebuild jobs in various places, but I don't know. To me, it's UC fans and kind of know what SMU is, and it seems like we'll see what they do in the rest of the season, but that's a tough look for a team going into a new conference, taking a step up similarly to what UC did last year, and playing a game that they probably expected to be, a tune-up game. Like, let's see what we got and let's play a bunch of guys, and it certainly didn't turn out to be that way. Anything from those, I don't know how much you got to see of either of those, but anything from those two first ACC games that jump out to you guys?
Well, Florida State in that game against Georgia Tech, yes, it was in Ireland, and that kind of sets the tone for everything being weird in general. But outside of that, I mean, when you talk about a top 10 team, you talk about a team that wanted to sue their way out of their own conference last season, not to mention just all of the news around them this entire offseason. You have, especially when it comes to the college football playoff, you have to come out and do better. Whether it's DJ, you need to get a job, or whoever you have at quarterback,
right?
You got to figure it out, and they did not. So it's not a good look for Florida State. They kind of end up with a ton of egg on their face. It is what it is. Not a good tone setter for your season. But hat tip to Georgia Tech. They took care of things. I know your boy Seamus was the only one on the pick'ems that had them winning the game. But good on them for figuring it out. Is what it is. As far as SMU at Nevada, SMU is a nothing burger. It's a giant nothing burger. And
I mean, they're just all hype, all portal this, portal that. Everybody come back to Dallas after you either flamed out at your other school or want to come. I mean, transfer for whatever reason you want, but like
you sneak by Nevada in a 5-point win. Congratulations. I don't know. I mean, are the 17 SMU fans back home excited? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, wins are better than losses, but like in both of these cases, you mentioned like Florida State is not only the loss, it's the whole offseason and even more of chirping and talking about how the ACC isn't good enough and we got to get out of here because we're getting buried by our competition. And Eric, it's like, don't go to Ireland and lose to Georgia Tech,
right? After
you've basically crapped on the conference for openly. I mean, you're in a lawsuit against them. It's not like this isn't just fans, doing fan stuff. So, and then SMU is I've always when Sonny Dykes was there, I have a long running joke about the ESPN special, the Hilltop or whatever the hell they called it, where they canceled they didn't start after they got whooped by UC here. They stopped the whole series. Like episode 12 exists somewhere. They filmed it.
It's in the archive.
And it just never got released, and neither did episode 13 or 14, however many games they had left. Like they just stopped the show. But they're just it's a I don't know, man. It's like I don't even know what the right word is. Not front runner because they don't really win, but it's just like a smoke and mirrors program. Like look at all this stuff, but then when it comes to the actual playing of the sport, nothing's changed. It's still the same program. Now they might bounce back, who knows, but it certainly doesn't give you a whole lot of warm and fuzzies if you're an SMU fan that this is going to be any different. Even in the smaller game yesterday, like a New Mexico, Montana State FCS FBS game, we get our first FCS upset Montana State scores with 10 seconds left, touchdown at New Mexico to win that game. So I mean, it was upsets across the board, or much closer games than most expected across the board.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead. Let's switch it up and talk a little bit, or let's stay in the ACC. Florida State, thought to be one of the teams to compete for the league, along with Clemson. And I guess if you're looking at the rankings, which is kind of silly, but Clemson, Miami, NC State. I'm kind of looking at Clemson and going, okay, you kind of had a little bit of a downturn from your your consistent playoff appearances and stuff like that. They had brought quarterbacks back, Cade Klubnik, but it feels like kind of a wide open conference right now. I'm not sure who I would really want to stand on the table for after watching the FSU game, after kind of knowing what Miami has been all these years of a lot of hype going into the season, and then dropping several games. Not sure. I mean, NC State brings in Grayson McCall from Coastal Carolina to play quarterback, so it feels like a pretty wide open league right now. Is there anybody there that you think has an advantage, or is this just kind of a big wait and see for these guys?
Well, with Clemson starting against Georgia, you obviously have a game. It's a measuring stick game, right? I mean, it's a giant. If you can pull off the unbelievable and beat Georgia in the opening your opening game, that kind of sets your tone. If Clemson's able to pull that off, that's going to be monumental for their entire season. Outside of that, though, I don't know. You got Miami, Florida in your home or in your season opener. Always a barn burner, if you will. We'll see how that one goes. I'm with you, though. I think NC State kind of has. They have the probably the more favorable schedule, as they don't have a true test until they get to Clemson to open up their conference slate. But I don't know, that one is, you got plenty of stuff going on early in the season to kind of figure out who's going to be at the top.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a week one is a rough time for an anxiety bowl. But Miami at Florida week one, like the loser of that game, we'll get into the SEC, and Florida's just, I mean, it's a schedule like I've never seen before. And it's all based on last year and tradition and history, but like the schedule that they have stacked in front of them, that first game for both those programs, I mean, Florida coming off, a down year. Miami with some expectations, but we kind of know where that's gone lately. The loser of that game is in for a rough start of the season, just from a mentality standpoint. Jumping to the SEC, you mentioned the Clemson-Georgia game. Georgia comes in as the preseason number one team. I feel foolish saying that, like, I don't buy it. Not that I would have them much farther than like number 2 or number 3. Personally, I think Ohio State is the best team in the country as of right now, based on the insane amount of talent that they have amassed in the transfer portal this offseason. But I mean, at some point, like, Georgia just has to take a dip, don't they? I mean, and by dip, I mean like still be a very, 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 very good team, but not this undefeated juggernaut that they've been in the last 2 years. Carson Beck back. They bring in Florida running back transfer Trevor Etienne, who very, very good. Got, I think, a little overshadowed last year at Florida. because of their year, and then also did a lot of split carries. I think he's going to get a ton of action this year for the Dogs. But yeah, like you said, Clemson week 1. SEC's just, adding Oklahoma and Texas, going to be super interesting to see how that all goes. I think Texas is probably better suited to make that jump than Oklahoma, but it's going to be a bear. I mean, Florida's last 5 games. Now they play Tennessee and Kentucky, but then their last 5 games is something like LSU, Ole Miss, Texas, Florida State, and I don't have it pulled up, but somebody else in there that is just, it's just like, where do you catch a breather?
You're talking about for Florida?
For Florida, yeah.
Their last 5 games are at Georgia,
they go
at Georgia, at Texas, hosting LSU, hosting Ole Miss, and at Florida State.
Yeah, the Georgia game's at home. But then even before that, they got their non-conference is Miami and UCF. And then Samford is their cakewalk game. But their last 1, 2, 3, 4, 8 games. UCF at Tennessee, Kentucky. And then what you mentioned, with the Kentucky they've lost to, I think 4 of the last 5 times. Georgia at Texas, LSU, Ole Miss at Florida State. Good luck. You might get a couple of them, and that ends up being a very, very. And they still got to play Texas A&M, who I think is in the same boat as Miami and some of these teams that seem to always get ranked and don't fulfill that. But that's the new reality, even more so in the SEC. You throw in Oklahoma and Texas, and you're just. They're easy. They have one quote unquote easy SEC game, and that's at Mississippi State.
I'm looking at it as week by week. I'm not trying to get too far down the road in that regard, but I'm trying to look at who has the biggest game. Obviously, Clemson Georgia is a giant game, and I think that's probably the biggest game, but that's not to be overshadowed by I don't know. But Notre Dame, Texas A&M, also a giant game.
Oh, yes.
As far as the SEC goes. And
yeah, USC, there are a lot of.
I think USC LSU has potential to be a very close game all the way down to the end.
Yeah, the college football has really done a great job of setting up these marquee first week of the season games that, start on. And we have a ton of games on Thursday. I'm not sure there's any great matchups, but way more games than in years past starting on Thursday. You got a few on Friday, and then you get into Saturday, and then even into Sunday and Monday. The Sunday nighter with USC and LSU that you mentioned. But yeah, there's some really, really good opening week games that, are appointment viewing for some of these teams. You mentioned the Texas A&M Notre Dame one. That's another one. A&M new coach, whole bunch of new players. How are they going to look? Marcus Freeman at Notre Dame, new quarterback. Riley Leonard transfers in from Duke. Trying to bounce back a bit from what they did last year, and there's a lot of good stuff. And I think the SEC is just going to. It is every year, but can anybody jump up and get Georgia is going to be the question. They're still going to have so much talent. So many good players are even still there after these last couple of years of winning the national championship.
Yeah.
Do you see anybody that, if outside of Georgia, that you're eyeing? We haven't even talked about Alabama. Nick Saban retiring and Kalen DeBoer coming in, so stealing people's kickers. Those rascals in Tuscaloosa just stealing kickers.
Chuck was mad.
He was mad. Fired up for that one.
I don't know.
He wasn't mad about his receiver going to South Carolina or his defensive end going to Oklahoma. but he was mad about the kicker going to Alabama.
I don't know that anybody. I'm one of those that do not like the preseason polls. I think they're garbage. I think they're a popularity contest, and that's why I hated high school. So for me, I'm not I'm not one for these polls. I think they're stupid. So I'm kind of going back to your opening statement. But we'll see. I don't know. I mean, I think that there's plenty going on with the larger conferences now in the SEC, the Big Ten. They're both in their inaugural season of these expanded conferences. I don't know what the Big Ten is going to do for their map.
Oh, they made the new one. They've already updated the map commercial.
They got the map commercial.
I mean, it's a great commercial.
It is. But we'll see. I think you're going to probably see when things fall at the end of the season, when all the cards fall and everything the dust settles and all of that. I think you're going to see probably more than one 9-3 team in the college football playoff for the first time.
I think that's.
You're not going to have a Cinderella story like you had once upon a time that Cincinnati got to do ever again, and times are different. It is what it is.
Yeah, I think there'll be several teams with, at least 2, maybe 3. I mean, because you look at, an SEC team can have, you could lose 2 losses, have 2 losses, make the conference championship game, lose that, and I would still feel comfortable saying you're one of the top 12 teams, depending on, who you played and who your losses were to. And
right.
Same thing in the Big Ten now, just depending on how your schedule shakes out and who you're playing. I mean, you could have a very good team, but you're playing Ohio State, Michigan, Oregon, whoever. And yeah, it's certainly going to be some adjusting to like what, and, it'll probably, the best way I think of it is kind of like almost looking at it as like the NFL model of where NFL, you don't really care about the win-losses of the regular season as far as like who's good, who's not. It's like who's playing good and who makes the playoffs. And how you got there doesn't really matter because you got there.
That's all that matters.
And so I think that idea is going to take a while for some fans and some people to be like, you can't have a 2-loss or 3-loss team in the playoff. And I'll be like, well, yeah, you can, because their 9-3 is still better than your like 11-1 or 10-2.
Yep.
Because I mean, look who they played compared to look who you played. So it's certainly going to be some adjusting going to the Big Ten. I think there will be some adjusting for the new teams. Certainly for the new teams coming in from the Pac-12. It's just a totally outside maybe Washington, like. It's a totally different style than what Oregon and USC and UCLA are used to playing on a week in, week out basis. How is this? The travel thing I think is overblown. But as you accumulate injuries, as you get later into the season, and I haven't looked. You there?
Yeah, sorry, I'm getting a spotty connection, but we're back.
Did StreamYard just crap the bed?
I don't know if it's StreamYard or if it's my internet here at my mom's, but either way.
No, because mine did it too. Both our screens started doing like the blackout and the spinning thing, but either way. But yeah, how much does the wear and tear of the cumulative of the flying from Eugene to wherever they have to go, or LA to wherever they have to go, and injuries and weather and just a totally different style of play? I mean, this is not what they're used to. So what does that look like when you get into November?
Yeah,
And I
I,
think Oregon.
I think the West Coast teams are probably going to struggle a little bit more than everybody else, especially when you're talking about a UCLA, a USC joining a predominantly East Coast or Midwest conference. It is again like I know I feel like I've said this phrase now about 17 times in this podcast, but it is what it is. Like you joined a conference that is predominantly not of your time zone.
Well, and just the styles are. I mean, Ohio State will air it out and play that style of offense, but like the styles are just so different.
Mm-hmm.
How much acclimation does it take to play a Michigan? Because it's just a loaded. I mean, you got so many teams now. Your schedules just don't. You don't get the luxury of like, and they didn't get this luxury before. But you don't get the luxury of playing the 5 Big Ten West teams not named Wisconsin that have been like, very average for the last decade.
Yeah.
You might get 1 or 2 of them, and then you're getting Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, USC, Oregon, Washington, some combination of all those teams, and then the other teams that are jumping up or having better than expected seasons. So I think Ohio State is loaded. How they manage Will Howard, I mean, I don't think they need to manage him like he's some, awful quarterback. But I mean, you have 2 of the 5 best running backs in the country, easily 2 of the 10 best running backs in the country. Like Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson as your 2 running backs is just, it's hilarious. You have a freshman wide receiver who people are talking about as like, can he win the Heisman? I mean, I think that's a little bit of a stretch, but everything I've heard and seen is that Jeremiah Smith is as advertised. Caleb Downs transfers over from Alabama to playing safety. You bring back a ton of your defensive backfield. Like second year, I think, or maybe even third year of Jim Knowles as your defensive coordinator, so you're even more comfortable with that. Like I just think they have, and it's beat Michigan, win the title, or we're gonna be talking about firing Ryan Day again.
Yeah, I think that conversation will probably continue throughout the entirety of the season. Obviously, you're tested as far as looking at the schedule for Ohio State. You're tested maybe against Iowa, but you're certainly tested against Oregon, who is a lot of people's
that
favorite.
Game should be awesome.
A lot of people's favorite this season. Penn State will be a late mid-season test, I guess. Michigan.
Yeah, we'll see there. I mean,
is Michigan going to be what they were under Jim Harbaugh?
Michigan's defensive line and overall, like the defensive line, Mason Graham is one of the best college football players in the country. Will Johnson is one of the best college football players in the country. Offensively, I think that's where you have the questions. I mean, they had a very veteran offensive line. You graduate a very experienced quarterback, replace him with Alex Orji, who is totally different in style than JJ McCarthy. Blake Corum's gone. Roman Wilson's gone. They have a very good tight end, Colton Lovelace, back. But, like, there's a lot of questions offensively. I think defensively they're still going to be, Wink Martindale, who coached at UC, comes in as their defensive coordinator with Jesse Minter going to the Chargers with Jim Harbaugh. A lot of questions, though, on the offense. What that's going to look like, how that's going to work. But defensively, they should still be awesome. I mean, defensive line might be the best in the country still. But yeah, like you said, Oregon, Ohio State, what do we get out of Michigan? What does Washington, what does USC look like? I mean,
that's a great question.
New quarterback who played great in their bowl game, but like, I think there's some sneaky heat on Lincoln Riley.
That'd be wild.
I mean, they started, 7-0 last year? I mean, I was talking about them on this show. Like I said, I thought Michigan was going to win the national championship. So I'll toot my horn a bit on that one from the jump. But I also was like, how is anybody going to stop USC, who looked unbeatable for 6 weeks, and then all of a sudden looked like they were not interested in playing football for the back half of the year.
Can't see Lincoln Riley being on the hot seat yet because his name is probably bigger than his legacy.
Not hot seat is like going to get fired, but I think there's like some underlying pressure there to, I mean, this was viewed as a coup that we got you, and last year we lost to Tulane in a bowl game.
You also lost Caleb Williams, and
we'll see. Right, it's like, well, let's see what happens this year. Yeah. Let's see. We're not really going to talk Big 12. That'll get talked about, and you guys always nail that on the nightcaps on Saturday night?
Saturday night.
So we'll skip the Big 12. So that's kind of your Big 4 conferences. Group of 5.
Talk Oregon State, Washington State.
I don't have any idea what they're about Oregon State. I honestly I've tried to look at as much as I can to get ready for this, and did not really cross my mind. I don't know. I think one has a new coach, Oregon State. Jonathan Smith left to go to Michigan State. I'm not sure who they hired. I feel bad for them. I honestly do feel bad for them.
Just turn on the CW and you will have them on in between reruns of Buffy.
Is that where their games are on?
They are on the CW.
Oh, yes. Well, hey, at least they're on for their fans. I mean, that's the thing is, like, I can feel bad for those guys. I don't feel bad for like anybody else, but like they did none of this to them. They were already fighting a battle in their own conference, being kind of, out compared to the other schools and off the path and everything. So that's just rough, man. But at the same time, I don't want them in the Big 12.
I don't know.
Group of 5. The group of 5 will obviously get one spot in this new playoff. Unlike what ESPN was saying yesterday, it is not guaranteed that it will be the 12th seed. Now, it will more than likely almost always be the 12th seed. But if you have a 12-0 or something, I don't think they will give them the 12th seed. But
not if you're looking at a couple 9-3.
Right, 9-3s that didn't make their conference championship and stuff like that. Right. Boise State, I think, is one of the teams to keep an eye on. Ashton Jeanty, the running back for Boise State, really, really good player. Like, he's worth, if you're up 10 o'clock looking for something to watch, and they're on CBS Sports or whatever, or ESPN2 or something, like, definitely worth checking out Ashton Jeanty.
Were you surprised at their quarterback battle and who won? I
mean, a little bit.
A 5-star loser?
It makes you ask some questions. Like, okay, you're speaking of Malachi Nelson, who is a USC transfer who did not win the quarterback competition at Boise. So yeah, was he a 5-star to begin with? That's a question.
That's a very good
or is he, development's just not there, or some other factor, hard to tell. Him, not plugged in. But from a national perspective, it certainly raises eyebrows when the 5-star USC transfers down to Boise State and then doesn't like pretty much win the job right out of the gate. So trying to think who else. I think the Sun Belt is always going to be fun. App State, Troy, Coast. Is Coastal still in the Sun Belt? I don't even know. Those teams jump around all the time from Conference USA and stuff. But yeah, there's always going to be. Does anybody in the AAC? Memphis, I think, is probably right there with Boise. I would say Boise, App State, Liberty. Jamie Chadwell, they're going to have another good team because they're going to play an atrocious schedule. So they're going to stack up a whole bunch of gaudy wins. But, who comes out of that from the group of five to take that one spot? And, I think the thing I'm most looking forward to from the playoff perspective is just seeing these home games and really, really hoping to see some very fun matchups where teams from the South have to travel to some inclement weather and just see how much that potentially plays into it. I think it's ridiculous that they're only doing that for the first round and we're still catering to the bowl system and trying to keep the pointless bowl system alive, and that all these games up until the semifinals aren't at home stadiums.
Yeah, I don't love that. I don't. I think that they're clinging on to vestiges of a lost time.
They just make up so many excuses as to why they have the towns can't accommodate, or the stadiums aren't weather fitted for winter games. I'm like, they played the last week of November.
The Rose Bowl's still talking about they have to have this game at this time because
don't get me started on the Rose Bowl. Because of a freaking sunset.
Yep.
A sunset.
Whatever.
Over some mountains.
In a desert.
Yeah. Well, anything else you're interested in? I mean, we kind of ran through some of these conferences very quickly. We'll obviously get in much, much more detail next week when we have some results from the huge amount. Everybody gets going. I don't think there's, probably. I do remember the one year UC had a bye week 1. That was weird.
Well, we had a question in the mailbag. I'm curious to get your thoughts. How would you feel about Cincinnati playing in a week 0 matchup?
I guess it just depends, what it is. Is it just I have no problem with it. There were 4 games this week. I think it's nice to have a standalone time slot. I mean, if you said, who are they playing? But even still, would you have rather played Towson yesterday or next week?
I think it was a marquee matchup.
Oh yeah, I'm fine with anything that shines light on UC.
I agree.
And that's, next week they're at 2:30 on ESPN Plus. Now, obviously, they're playing an FCS team, so that's par for the course. I mean, I'm not sitting here saying that they should be in some other slot or whatever. But if you started, say they were started a Big 12 game, like Florida State and Georgia Tech did, sure. So I mean, you're getting a standalone game versus if they started against a Big 12 team Saturday at, say, 3:30, who knows what channel they'd be on with how many, with 50 other, 20 other, 30 other games going on at the same time.
Right.
I don't think, and again, what kind of team do you have coming back? Does the extra week truly matter? Florida State turns around and plays Boston College Monday night. So, they don't really get a big break from traveling over there. And I don't know. I'm not sure what Georgia Tech does. They might even they get less of it. They play Saturday, but they play at home against Georgia State. So, Florida State's just starting off with 2 conference games right in a row, and they don't get much of a turnaround from that trip.
Banger after banger
after banger. Did you see where Pat said he drank Seamus asleep on the plane over?
Pat's lucky he still has a job.
he was on one Friday.
He was on
Talking
something.
about eating 100-milligram gummies to get
He
to
was
get
on
him
something.
to make him disappear before they landed the plane in Ireland.
Jeez.
So, but that's wrestling talk on the Bearcat brunch. But yeah, I wouldn't have a problem with it. I mean, because now you have 2 bye weeks.
Yeah.
So how do your bye weeks fit? You play 1 week earlier, but then do you get a bye week maybe a little bit closer to the beginning of the season and then more to the middle? I think it's very, very, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but like it's very dependent on your situation. I don't see a plus or minus necessarily either way. But I would love to have some be good enough, or UC get to the point where they can get into some of these big marquee non-conference or even conference games to start the season. I think that helps build excitement.
Yeah.
Like if you're in the summer and you're looking at playing a league game to start, or a non-conference, a good non-conference game to start, and that's your first game. I always think that makes for some good, exciting build up to the year.
Well, the college season is here, and that's plenty of reason for celebration.
It is. Tyler, we will answer your question this week. We are staying away from the UC stuff today on this show because we will have it covered every which way we possibly can on tomorrow night's show and Wednesday night show. Wednesday night we will be joined by Anthony DeFino from the athletic department, who will kind of give us his annual what's new at Nippert, giving all the fans what to expect this season. I know we'll be discussing potential upgrades and modifications to the sound system, as that was tweeted out last week by John Cunningham, and I'm sure we'll get into grab and go beer lines and all sorts of fun stuff that fans want to know. I think they do a great job of getting out those info guides and letting everybody know, but we'll get a big jump on that Wednesday, and then Chad and I will play the schedule game. We'll just go down and talk about everybody UC is going to play and talk about the Bearcats, and I'm sure you guys will do a lot of the same stuff. As I said at the start, if you are interested in sponsoring the Bearcat Brunch, that is available. Please reach out to myself on the board. Or
as is the recap show on Saturdays.
Oh, there we go. On Twitter, on the Bearcat Journal page on Twitter, reach out to Chad. We do have someone that I have been discussing with, but nothing is final. So if you if you're interested, please let us know. The show this year will be at 9:30 a.m. We always try, this might be the first time some people are listening. We always try to keep it at 1 hour. Try to get done before any of the Bengals pregame stuff starts. We know how much, airspace that takes, so we want to get our show in and get out before that starts up. We use a website a lot called gamesonpaper.com that really dives into the analytical side of the game and gives you some good data about what happened and why it happened. And Jeff and I will obviously talk probably 75% the UC game, 20% what caught our attention from college football that week, and then a little bit of some Bearcats in the NFL once all that stuff gets going. So with that, I think, do you have anything else we need to touch on, Aaron? Because I think we're good for a preview show.
Yeah, I think I agree. Let's get out of here.
Well, I appreciate everybody who jumped on. Apologies for the slight delay. It's the preseason for everybody. Remember that next week. First game for the vendors, first game for the ticket takers, first game for the officials. So everybody needs to work out some some bugs here and there. But thank you for joining. Looking forward to another fun season of talking UC football, and hope everybody has a great Sunday.